Is Louise, and I am so excited to be here. We are going live and we're going to be talking about the breastfeeding journey and the breastfeeding realities. And we are also going to be joined by an incredible guest, and she is a birth doula and she is in London and supporting the mamas. That has been on the journey of breastfeeding and bottle feeding, or you are going to be joining us on that journey, then this is going to be incredible and for you. So amazing. Let's add her in. Hello, hello.
Morning. Hello.
So good to see you, Cleo.
It's so good to see you. How are you?
I'm super good. As a breastfeeding mama myself, I'm so happy to have you on here. So happy
Yes.
to have your wisdom, because I know we had a quick chat and
Yeah.
it can be a journey and a different journey for different women. So I would love to frame this conversation for anyone watching. Like I say, if you are an existing breastfeeding mama on this journey, bottle feeding mama on this journey, you're about to go through this experience, or maybe you're actually friends with someone or know someone who is, it can be a really great way to get some wisdom from Cleo so that we can support the parents out there that are going to be using bottles, the mamas out there that are going to be feeding. So let's enter into this conversation. Cleo, how did you get into being a doula? I would love to know that.
Well, I have always been really interested in childbirth and pregnancy. I was that kid who was always asking my mum to recount my birth story. And then I had my son, who was my first baby 9 months ago. And I had a really very intense but amazing birth at home. I had a doula, which I didn't know doulas existed before I was pregnant myself. And both my doulas were so amazing that I just felt this calling after to want to help women and families the same way that they helped me. So that's kind of, yeah, that's kind of how I got into it on a professional level. But I think I've always known in some capacity or another, subconsciously, that I wanted to do something in birth. I don't think being a midwife is necessarily right for me, but yeah, being able to work and support women is the dream, right?
Yes, and you've got a 9-month-old. I have a 9-month-old.
Oh, you do! Amazing.
Dude.
Yeah.
And it's so true, like you say, sometimes you don't even hear of these roles like a doula.
Mm.
And then you go through an experience like pregnancy, like birth, and you realize how important it is to have some wisdom and some guidance, because really, you get this baby and you're like, I'm so in love. And what do I do?
I know, I know.
Of course, we've got our natural instincts. That is strong as a mama. But also, let's talk about this, because there are latching difficulties and latching challenges that we can sometimes come across. And these are the moments where you're like, this is something that I'm feeling challenged to navigate here. And we want to improve the space where women can actually have these conversations and be like, hey, I'm having a trouble here. Let's normalize these conversations. How can we help and support? Tell me about your experience as a doula with working with women with latching difficulties, and what are the most common ones?
I mean, to be honest, when it comes to actually latching, I think that it's such an unspoken. I feel like recently it's become a bit more of a spoken about topic, but I think that women really underestimate what a bad latch is and what the effects of that are. I didn't realize until I actually went through my kind of formal doula training that I had latching problems with my son. We ended up combi feeding him, so I had an amazing breastfeeding journey, but I did also supplement with formula and with bottles. And I think had I had the support and understanding what his latch was like, I think I would have been able to, I don't want to use the word persevere, but I definitely would have been able to maybe continue on a more breastfeeding dominant journey. Things like a high roof of the palate, which is what my son has. I didn't realize any of this, but he's such a textbook version of that. And I think lots of women think that breastfeeding either is supposed to be really easy at the beginning, and then they get very thrown off when a latch isn't made, or when a baby is having difficulty, especially in that first few hours after your baby's born, when you're feeling very vulnerable, you're
Yeah.
feeling so in love, but you really want to make it work. And I think women lose confidence with latches there, and also just the reality that breastfeeding can be painful and uncomfortable at the beginning. And I think that when we first started to talk about how breastfeeding and the kind of structure of your boob, and how, and when those kind of conversations came into the public sphere a bit more for women, it was more of a, oh well, you know, if it's uncomfortable, that's normal, don't worry. But actually that's not normal. And I think that people, yeah, I think when it comes to latch, my biggest thing is not to underestimate that your baby's mouth and your nipple might not necessarily work hand in hand at the beginning, and that's okay. And I think having the right support and things like this, and bringing up topics like this, is really important for that, for sure.
I love that you've mentioned so many things that I love. I love that you've mentioned that you've also went on to combi feed in different ways, and your journey maybe took a different way than you originally intended, which is something so common. And any mamas out there, mum guilt starts so early, and there's
Oh, so early.
so we're going to take away any shame about the journey being different to what you might have had in mind beforehand. And then also talking about, of course, babies have this incredible instinct, and we do too as mamas, but they're learning, their little mouths are learning to adapt to this world. We're learning as well, and to have that wisdom is so incredible.
Yeah.
So the natural nipple, Lauren behind this is so incredible with the research, the clinical research they've done into this. And she found during the research that there is this term in the industry that's called nipple confusion when using things like different bottles. And what Lauren actually discovered through her research is that's not necessarily true. And in fact, babies are perfect, and the bottles have a mismatch with the
Mhm.
biology of the different mouths. Like you're saying, there's different shapes to the roofs of the mouth, there's different shapes to the nipples. And so she went ahead in the research and actually 3D scanned a lactating breast during the feeding process to
Wow.
actually match the biology. So instead of it
Right.
being nipple confusion, it's more like a biology mismatch. And I'm
Yeah.
saying this because I don't know about your experience with bottle feeding. I only know my experience with bottle feeding with the natural nipple that went so smooth. And I know that's not always the case. And we're touching upon things like biology here. And not everyone has done that 3D scan of that lactating breast for the flow and the rate and the speed that it comes out of the bottle to the shape of the nipple and the shape of the different mouths. And do you
Yeah.
know that on average, parents go through between 4 to 6 different brands before actually managing to find one that fits right? This is in the conventional
That
ways,
was us. That was
not,
us.
not the natural nipple ways because of the biology design. So let's talk about that from your personal experience, but also as a doula, what
Mm.
you come across with different families and maybe the frustrations that they go through as they're finding the right match and going through that process, and any advice or support you would give them during this process.
I mean, what you touched on there about nipple confusion, it's such, the term nipple confusion, I have a love-hate relationship with it. I think there is a lot of discourse online about it too. I think that it definitely does a really good job at summing up the emotional feelings that come out of it. I think that you can see on a baby's face that they look confused, and that makes a mum feel confused and can really knock confidence. And there's nothing like seeing your baby being full and fed and happy. So having to spend that 15, 20 minutes with a baby looking at you confused, not liking it, pushing away, it's worrying. And so the term nipple confusion, it's that. The baby's confused, but actually, like you said, there's been so many studies on them recently that actually we're starting to see that nipple confusion might not actually be something that exists. And like you said, it's more of a biological mismatch. And I love that term because it is like that. And I think you have to look at the markers. And I think with families that I'll go on to help with breastfeeding is that you the things you want to look out for is how to identify what kind of latch your baby has and what kind of bottle helps with that. And I think the idea of biology and something natural is so important when it comes to feeding a baby. I mean, the amount of if you really look into it, the amount of brands and bottles out there that actually are designed in a boardroom, maybe with one woman present, but probably a bunch of male product designers who I'm sure have had some amazing training, that have looked into the science behind it, but actually they're brands and it's not natural. And I think that finding the correct kind of nipple and teat that matches your baby is going to be really important. And I think that when it comes to supporting people, and advice would be, identify what kind of latch, or what you can see, like what can you see on your baby's mouth, how are their lips moving, what is the inside of their palate look like, how do they seem, what they're sucking in at the cheeks. Identify those things, and it doesn't matter if you don't know the answer, but you can usually see through that identification what kind of nipple, what kind of teat, what kind of natural way your baby's going to suck milk, basically. So yeah, I think what you talk about with mismatch is so important, because nipple confusion, I don't know if it's necessarily a real thing. I think it's more about learning the biology of you and your baby, which for so long women have not been taught to do, sadly.
I took a big breath out when you spoke about, okay, so perhaps this term nipple confusion might not actually exist. And like we were sharing with the natural nipple research, we found that actually bottles are being designed, that babies are having to adapt to this design, because the natural nipple actually 3D scanned and done the biology and thought, oh, there's different flows, there's different nipple sizes. Let's actually get a nipple that fits your actual shape, so that, hey, the baby doesn't have to adapt to this bottle, which is so important. But you talked about the benefit of at least that label gives a mom a reason to think, oh, this is real. This has an emotional weight on me as a mom, or as a parent. We know it could be another carer that's actually doing the feeding as well with these bottles, whether it's breastfeeding or the bottles. It's that same frustration, and that baby looking up at the mom or the parent and being like, oh, help. And my heart as a mom just was like, I held my breath. And you giving the name to the emotional experience that we have as parents and mothers during that journey, that is something that I had no idea would have as big an impact on me going through this, because you're likely sleep deprived, whether you're the mother or you're another type of parent or carer, because sleep deprivation makes you more emotional. Having a baby look at you in different ways, and you're like, I don't know what to do. I used to say to my baby all the time at different stages, I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm learning too. Like,
yes, exactly. I mean, that's a really important thing, isn't it, as well, of like, there aren't necessarily answers that come about straight away as well. Like, I think especially with feeding, it's such a personal and such an intimate process that you don't realize is going to conjure up all kinds of feelings, and especially feelings of like inadequacy. I feel like a lot of mums I've spoken to, the biggest thing is like, oh, I don't feel like I'm enough. Am I producing enough? Am I feeding enough? Am I doing enough? And actually, you just showing up for your baby and trying is more than enough. I mean, there are mums that are on their third, fourth baby that are looking at their baby going, why don't you take a bottle? Like, am I doing something wrong? And then there are mums with their first baby who are going through the same thing. I think that it makes me sad to hear that you're going, oh, I'm sorry, I'm learning too. But actually, it's really important to factor that in, because you're not supposed to know everything. There's so much to know, and your instincts are so amazing, but they can only take you so far.
yes,
Yeah.
it's so true. And like you touched upon and you named upon there, I'm sure with your clients and yourself, and when we speak to a mother or a parent on that journey, we really realize that there's a version of the reality that you have in mind before you become a mom or a parent, and then there's a reality you face. It doesn't matter what happened with one child, it could be different for the second baby, or maybe you're the first time. That we have so many reasons to question ourselves and be like, am I doing this enough? Is this good enough? And like I say, that mom guilt or that parent guilt can start from the very beginning when things go differently to what we had in mind, and we kind of think that we're the problem. And that's very sad, but very real that
Mm,
we do feel these things.
yeah.
And so we might have to change our approach. I know you mentioned this, and I'd love to know your experience with this, Cleo, and also talk about your clients that you also have, where the reality that they're facing. So they might think, hey, before I began, I thought I was going to do solo breastfeeding. And now I'm realizing that there's maybe pressures to go back to work, or maybe you've got mastitis, or maybe you're unwell and actually the other parent or carer has to step in and do the feeding. And so you find yourself in these situations where you might actually need to do combo feeding or switch from breast to bottle to back to breast again for different things. How do you recommend people add in the bottle when they're also doing the breastfeeding? Is there a particular month or milestone for doing this switch and adding in the bottle? What would your advice be for someone who is going to introduce that?
So it's interesting because what we were talking about with nipple confusion, so the general rule of thumb was always to wait until your baby has established a great latch and that you've got a good
Mm-hmm.
breastfeeding pattern and a good breastfeeding routine. And then once they're a few weeks old and they've had that time, then you introduce a bottle. But actually, what we're now seeing, and from all of I've been reading a lot about this recently, and talking to some midwives actually, one of which was my midwife, is a pattern we're seeing is actually reducing bottle confusion tends to be easier to do when the baby is really, really small. So in those first few weeks. So actually the advice is switching. Now, obviously the caveat with that is every baby is going to be different. There are some babies that will go 2 years, won't take a bottle, and then one day will decide that actually I'm happy to latch to this. And there are some babies that as newborns, they need to establish that latch with their mother first. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it really depends on the baby. My own experience, I felt such tremendous guilt. My whole pregnancy, I was so sure I was going to exclusively breastfeed. My baby was never going to touch an ounce of formula. I was going to be able to pump and I'd have this amazing supply and all of this stuff. And when that didn't happen, I was so disappointed because I felt like I'd failed. And that feeling of not having enough of a supply and meant I couldn't pump meant that we did end up introducing a bottle. And
Yeah.
actually, I was so surprised at how naturally my son took to it. I was so nervous, but when it comes to introducing a bottle, I would always recommend to have another parent or another caregiver to do that first bottle. I think often when a baby, especially in that newborn stage where they rely so much on their sense of smell and their instincts, if they can smell mum, they're going to want mum.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think often having the dad or a grandma or a doula or whoever's present to help initiate that first experience of the bottle can be really great. Saying that, some babies feel a lot more comforted and more relaxed when they're with mum. And ultimately, we want the baby to be relaxed. If baby's in a good place and baby's feeling in a calm state and they're at a stable baseline, it's going to be a lot easier to introduce new things like a bottle. I would also say, which is another thing I've been doing some research into recently, is when to introduce that bottle at what time of day. So the advice again used to be when baby's really hungry, they're so desperate for some food, they've just woken up from a nap, they're starving, that's a good time to introduce because they don't mind, they just want the milk. But actually, what we're learning is that with a lot of mums, that doesn't work at all. And it's because of that baseline. When baby isn't relaxed and baby's not feeling safe, they're not going to want something new and something that feels different and foreign. They're going to want comfort. And I think identifying between is your baby feeding for comfort, which is totally fine and is a very normal function for a baby, or is your baby feeding for food? And if your baby is feeding for comfort, then maybe that's not the time to introduce a bottle because they want mum. But when your baby is feeding for food and they seem happy and they're relaxed, that would be a good time to introduce a tea or a bottle or a nipple that isn't yours.
That's great advice, and actually makes sense because we were a bit like that even as grown-ups and adults
Yeah.
when it's if something new is going to come in, we want to make sure that we're calm and we're regulated and we're ready for that change. So that is really sound advice. And I love that, because obviously you're incredible and you've given no right answer for that, because we know it's different. And hey, we might not all be in an ideal situation where things can go so smooth. So it's like, do you know, you're on your own journey, but here's something that is really incredible for everyone to take away is, if it is possible, choose a moment when the baby is calm, feels safe, and going to be more welcoming to some big change coming in, which is incredible.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
just gonna bop down just to grab my charger that pops up.
Please go for it.
Let me do bop. That is really incredible. And I also had a challenge at the beginning when I was breastfeeding. I was in the hospital and I had the pain. I was like, oh my goodness me, I was not expecting this. And my baby had to basically, I was lying on my side and it had to latch all night and just go through the motions. And it was really difficult and challenging. And then my baby wakes up, he still wakes up every hour, every 2 hours. And my journey with sleep deprivation is such a thing. And I often think, wow, in order for me to actually breastfeed this baby on my own, it is not always possible for everyone to do that and actually be in a situation to do that.
Yeah.
And it was very humbling. And I feel like that's the word I've learned from being a parent and being a mother, is just being humbled. And I try to use that word humbled instead of having, guilt or judgment. And I mean it in a really beautiful way of this journey, becoming a mother or becoming a parent. It's so unique. It's so different. There's so many challenging factors that are going to be different for all of us. And to have someone like you, Cleo, that is actually dedicating your time and your energy to serving parents, to serving mothers in this transition is so incredible and so needed. To sum up what we've been talking about is parent guilt, mom guilt is real. You have your own story. There can be advice out there, and it might or it might not actually fit you in your situation. You're going to have emotions to process around that, and you're not alone in that situation. And you really don't have to be alone, because you can actually get a professional in like Cleo and a doula to support that transition from the actual physicalities and practicalities to the emotional stuff to, hey, it's pretty normal if you look down at your baby and they're looking up at you looking a little bit confused, whether that's actually on the breast or the bottle. As we've established, this nipple confusion is a term in the industry, and Lauren, our founder, has dedicated 8 years to solving this problem and realizing, hey, if you're struggling like most people who are going through 4 to 6 brands of bottle to find the perfect one, it's not you and it's not your baby. The bottles have just been designed for the baby to adapt to this. Your breast is unique. It has different flows that can actually evolve as the baby evolves, a slower speed, a faster speed. If your baby's having things like colic or it's having digestive problems, hey, might just be the bottle that needs corrected to be an actual biological match. And as well as you, Cleo, dedicating your life to the service of parents and mothers, the Natural Nipple, we have the incredible founder, Lauren, behind us, who's dedicating her life to make sure that there's been 3D scans done of lactating breasts. There are different nipple sizes that you don't have to adapt, your baby doesn't have to adapt, that the biology match can exist. So spread the word to all your friends of Cleo and her support as a doula, because it's so needed. Spread the word to anyone who's having latching problems with the bottle, with the breast. Share this to as many people as you can in your community, and just know that there is support. There are options for you. This is such a journey. We're all just in it together, working this out. as women, as parents, as carers. Would you have any final words to add in here, Cleo, for how you would support someone going through this journey with all the emotional, all the practical, all the things as your ending anchor point?
I think you summed it up really well, but I would say the biggest word that sticks out for me is patience. And I think that is patience for yourself in learning and educating yourself and understanding what works for you. Patience for your baby. It's quite easy actually, and it's quite a taboo topic, but people lose patience with their babies all the time. It's a stressful situation feeding. And also patience for the people around you who are going to support you, who can also bottle feed, who can also help you with your breastfeeding journey. I think that you need to treat everyone, including yourself, with care as much as you are with your baby. I think mum is equally as important.
Yes, I so agree on that. And I so agree on the taboo as well of losing patience. And I have definitely grabbed a duvet in the middle of the night
They're
and
like,
just screamed into the duvet so it doesn't create much of a sound, just because I'm like, I am so beyond my patience, but I have to find more. I have to stretch my capacity.
yeah.
And also I've done this thing, I'm just going to share it in case it resonates or helps, where I've been at that stretch point where I've lost my patience, and then it made it into this song, and the song is I can't do this anymore. And then eventually I
I
start.
feel like that is a universal song. I think I've sung a version of that myself. I think most moms
Exactly.
have. Yeah.
And then suddenly you're smiling and you're like, okay, actually I can do this. And that's definitely things I've done in those moments that have supported me. So
Yeah.
get experimental and creative. I love that you've got
Yeah.
your
Do whatever helps. Do whatever helps.
My goodness me, Cleo, thank you so much for your expertise, for your time, for sharing your personal experience, for sharing your clients' experience, and helping us make these topics no longer a taboo, things that we're
Yes.
all sharing about and we're all talking about, so that everybody knows, hey, this is challenging, this is wonderful, this is beautiful, it's all the things, and here's some support if you need it.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It was nice talking to you.
Amazing. And where people can find you if they want to connect more with you?
Yep, you can talk to me on my Instagram, which is at Birth Doula London, and my website is www.birthdoulalondon.com.
I love it. And please, everyone who's watching this at home, send us a message, share your stories, share what landed most, and we would love to bring more of what you enjoyed for the next live. Well, have a
Thank
great
you so much. See you later,
See
Louise. Have a
you
good
later.
day.
Bye.
Bye.